Arash, I want your thoughts on this dynamic here. These talks are supposed to start very soon. It's not clear with some of the rhetoric coming from the Iranians if they are actually going to show up to this hotel, to this meeting. But what you hear from Inzamam there is this fundamental glaring problem with the equation right now. Iran, from the outset of this ceasefire, insisting that Lebanon was part of the deal, part of at least the 10-point basis of discussions that they said the U.S. had agreed to start from. The U.S. and Israel then said, no, Lebanon was never on the table. Pakistan, however, the mediator, where all of this is supposed to take place, they say that it was originally part of the conversation. So one of two things has to be true here. Either there was a massive miscommunication and there are strategic errors, or there's some kind of loophole being made here so that Israel can continue actions in Lebanon that very clearly will give Tehran a consistent out. What do you think is true?
Look, I think there was a very shaky start. There probably was a bit of a miscommunication, but also deliberate ambiguity on both sides. These are indirect sort of talks. But look, the upshot is right now there are scheduled talks between Israel and Lebanon. Quite unprecedented. They're going to happen in the State Department in D.C. Ambassadors of United States, Israel, and Lebanon are going to meet. There has been kind of language from both Israel and the U.S. that shows it's possible that things would slow down in Lebanon. So this is always going to be a very shaky start. But I think despite Iran to this moment not actually confirming that they'll show up in Islamabad tomorrow, I think they will. And I don't think Lebanon will prove to be a spoiler.
Leon, what are you going to be watching for tomorrow as people try to read the tea leaves to get the readout from what happens with the initiation of these talks? And who do you think really holds the leverage here?
Well, it's, we've had a lot of concerns about whether or not there was a clear objective in the war. It's also a concern about what is the clear objective with regards to the peace. And so the real issue is going to be what are the issues that they're willing to really sit down and negotiate about. The first issue, very frankly, is the Straits of Hormuz. We've got to arrive at a firm agreement as to how the Straits of Hormuz will operate and how we will allow all ships to be able to pass through the Straits. That's very important because that is the principal leverage right now that Iran holds against the United States. So that has to be a very key issue. They've then got to determine what happens with the enriched fuel, the enriched nuclear fuel, whether it stays in the ground or whether they go in and get it. They've got to determine what happens with the missiles that Iran still has. About a third are still active. And then they have to determine what happens with sanctions and whether or not a fund is established in order to deal with the damages from this war. There are a lot of issues on the table. And the real question is going to be whether or not the negotiators have the capability of trying to arrive at least those points of agreement that can end the war and allow the ceasefire to continue.
Do you think that Pakistan, Secretary, do you think that Pakistan is a good and trusted partner and place for these talks, to your last point there?
Well, I've always operated on the basis that you can't trust anybody at the table, very frankly. And so the issue is going to be, can they at least facilitate the discussions? And so far, I have to say that Pakistan has been pretty successful at being able to be the middle person here to try to bring these negotiators together. If they can do that, and if the negotiators can sit down in Islamabad on Friday and begin a negotiating process, that'll tell us an awful lot about whether or not there's any hope that ultimately some kind of permanent ceasefire can be arrived at.
Lieutenant, the president posted on Truth Social, I'm sure you saw, Lieutenant General, that basically the military forces are resting up right now, but he also mentioned the possibility of a next conquest. I found that to be a very interesting term, and I'm curious what you made of that, the word conquest, and if we are starting to sound more and more like one of the rogue world powers that we so often as Americans criticize?
Yeah, this is the kind of language that no professional soldier or diplomat would want to align themselves with. That's not how we speak. That's not how we think about our duties. I've been impressed with the professional competence of our great Air Force and Navy and special operators and the intelligence community working alongside the Israelis and with our other partners in the region. But at the end of the day, it's nonsensical to talk about some kind of a military conquest if it doesn't bear direct relevance to achieving the strategic outcome that Secretary Panetta alluded to. I mean, it doesn't matter how many Iranian vessels are sunk. We were never going to, this was never going to be a battle between the U.S. Navy and the Iranian Navy. That's not what this is about. So this is a metric that the administration is using so they can point to some sort of success. But unfortunately, it does not really bear much relevance to the stated reasons for starting this war to begin with. And I think right now, much of the confusion arises from the fact that we don't have professional diplomats that are actually involved in these negotiations. The Iranians, the Persians, have been doing this for about 3,000 years. And so we send in 2 real estate guys. And I don't think even the vice president showing up tomorrow is going to be able to salvage this in such a way. And so I think this may be where some of the confusion or the misinformation comes about whether or not Lebanon was supposed to be included in the ceasefire. I would have never believed in a million years that Israel would agree to something like that anyway.
Arash, how are Iranians reading this moment? I know that you work very hard to reach family and friends who are still on the inside. Are they hopeful that we are turning a corner? It appears that the U.S. is looking for a way out, at least here, that there is some desire to not restart this war. So do they feel hope in that sense? Or are they worried that because of how fragile all of this is, there could be more destruction around the corner?
Look, many Iranians are worried about, what the regime will be like, after the war. But I think, first of all, many were happy that the war is over. For the first day in 40 days, the bombs were not dropping over their heads. I see coffee shops were full in Tehran today. People were out. And I spoke to Hassan Zaidabadi, a lawyer, sort of a human rights activist in Iran, to ask his opinion. He told me something very interesting. He said that he welcomes the ceasefire. He hopes that it stays on. He's skeptical of, whether the Islamic Republic will really give up on its anti-Western hostility and when it would do so. But he says when there's no war, when guns are silent, and when we can hash out our differences inside Iran, it's better. Democratic activism has a better chance in peacetime conditions than under the war. So I think I speak for many when I say that democracy proponents in Iran are cautiously optimistic and welcome the ceasefire.
This administration keeps claiming some version of regime change happened here, in that the original leaders are dead. They seem to suggest from the president that the people who are running the country now are more reasonable. There are some serious reasons to doubt that. But who do you imagine they are talking about? Who the reasonable partner is, who can talk to the vice president, who can talk to Witkoff or whoever it may be, and come to a resolution here?
As always, when President Trump speaks, you almost have to put it in some sort of a crooked mirror to get some, it reflects something, but not what
like
it really says.
Like a funhouse mirror.
Exactly, right? So, but I think he's talking about Ghalibaf. And this is a guy who might show up to Islamabad tomorrow. He's the Speaker of the Parliament. He's the most powerful guy in the National Security Council. He's a repressive guy, he was a very brutal, when he was National Police Chief. But he also has a pragmatic side. He used to be mayor of Tehran. He has had, more of that side. So now it will be shown what kind of a man in power he will be. I can tell you one thing about this guy. He's an ambitious guy. He's wanted this all his life. All his life he's wanted to be Iran's strongest man. Now he is. But I would tell you this also, that some in Iran, like Pezeshkian, who's a president, who's a reformist, Rouhani, who's a sort of centrist, former president who dealt with the U.S. Senate deal with President Obama in 2015, they're kind of cautiously sort of backing Ghalibaf. So there is a chance, after all, that this Iranian team is one who will play ball with the U.S. and make a deal with the U.S. As a friend of mine says, it requires a diplomatic miracle. It won't be easy, but I think there are reasons to at least be very cautiously optimistic, if not as optimistic as President Trump seems to be.